What can I say about Dr. Toby Watkinson? My first experience with Dr. Toby Watkinson was after my son started having seizures, and we went to see another doctor who's fairly famous in his area for being very successful with these kids. In fact, Suzanne, who presented, works with this doctor, right? Okay, I'm going to leave him nameless for now, just to continue. And I tried to go back to him after my son started having seizures, and we had gone to, he was our second doctor that we went to, and he basically gave us like 6 different things to do, and wanted to do an organic acid test and said come back in 12 weeks. And I'm looking at my kid going, 12 weeks? You're kidding me. This is just not enough. There's got to be more we can do. And so on we went to multiple other doctors, and every once in a while we'd see him. Then after he started having seizures, by then his reputation had grown. I had seen him at conferences. I understood how much more he brought to the table than before, so I called him to kind of throw him in the mix of working on my son with the seizure situation, trying desperately to stay off the anticonvulsants. And rather than take us back, he said, you know what, no, I really think I need to pass you on to Dr. Toby Watkinson. And I think something like if anybody can make lemonade out of lemons, it's this guy. And now we'll fast forward to, I can't tell you how many times I've heard about this guy being behind some thread of something that you've learned about. Does that make sense at all? I mean, these doctors progress with stuff, but oftentimes I'll find out that it's something that he was discovering in his office with his muscle testing and with his vials and with his very specific way of working with people. So when I was ready to, I took my son to him once, and then I invited him to come to my summits, and he came to the first summit, and I asked him to see my son, and he said, no, I'm going to see you. Because you're trying to get a lot done, and your body isn't quite where it needs to be to do that, and that's not nearly as nice as he was about it, but the message was clear, and he works with some energetic sprays that I found powerful, and I don't find very many things to be powerful, so I was actually quite shocked by that. And he also told me I had to go on a wheat-free, dairy-free diet, which at this point, having hung out with Klinghardt and Gordon and Cowden and all these really high-level alternative medicine people, they all believed that wheat and dairy was a huge part of what was going on with anybody who was sick, not just these kids. So I went wheat-free, dairy-free, and did feel a lot better. But he just, number one, he's the only doctor that I know, and if there's another one out there, correct me if I'm wrong, who does all these things we're talking about with his clients. If he has a client, this is what he does with them. He doesn't skip thinking that you get the other part right. He harnesses each and every piece that he feels like are your biggest offenders. Do you think I'm saying that correctly? And I don't know anybody else like that, which is kind of shocking when you think about it. Anyway, and he's come to our summits, and he was the absolute rock star at our first summit. everybody loved him. And he's presenting today on what I think is going to be a really, really big piece for our kids, which is conductance. You'll explain more what that is. But what we're finding, and we have a homeopath in New York who's finding the exact same thing, is the first thing that she does with these kids is she tests them on EAV. And if their energy is below 74, she will not give them anything. What she does is she tests them on something called the AccuGraph. It's accu-graph.com. And she tests their meridian points, which I think you're going to go into an easier way to do it. And then she sends them home with a $15 red laser and has them laser the meridian points that are low on the AccuGraph. And they come back every week for 3 months until they get the energy up. Then she can start doing homeopathy and supplements. And the takeaway for me, and he's going to expound more, is that if you think about these kids and all their little engines of their cells that driving the ATP, getting stuff done, are off. They're just off. And so he's going to talk about, we can discuss all these potential supplements and things we can do all day long, but if the engines are off, nothing's going to happen. And I think we're really finding that that's what's going on with our kids, is their engines are off, and there's a disconnect between their head and their body. So, wow, I think that was enough of an introduction for Dr. Toby Watkinson. Here you go.
Well, before I start, I'd like to say I'm totally humbled by Dr. Gordon and Dr. Rapp and all the other speakers here, and also the parents, the people that that stand up here and go through pathway after pathway of things that I haven't seen for 35 years in school. And not only do they go through it, but they go through it correctly, and they go through it in a manner that helps us all revisit those very important things. And also, at the last meeting that I spoke at the Leah Foundation, at the end of my lecture, which was on homeopathic phage things that I do, I was asked, you're getting in my britches. I need to check with my wife on that. I know what her answer will be.
Whatever.
In any event, I was asked at the end of my talk that, well, we've heard about your successes, how about your failures? And I said, well, I have two big ones. I don't seem to be able to do it any faster, and I don't seem to be able to do it any cheaper. But
he's not cheap.
Yeah, I have recently found some technology that, when it rolls out, will make the job both quicker and cheaper, is my hope. That's my goal anyway. But what I like to do too is ask that we hold any comments or questions to the end, because I have a lot of material to kind of get through, and otherwise I won't get through it. So anyway, I didn't know the name of the seminar today, so I put autism spectrum disorders. And here's what I see in my practice is I see an autism patient, someone with that diagnosis, is having behavioral things. This is what we all see. We see behavioral issues and learning issues, language issues, pain, immune issues, emotion, physical, food things. And I think this has been well covered by everybody. But I think it is all on one slide. That this is, and it's not intended to be complete. It's intended to kind of bring these things to the top for a moment, because what we're seeing is we're seeing a child whose energy is all in their head. Those of us who use energetic testing techniques and so forth, we find that there's no energy in the body, and all the energy is in the head. So when we check where the energy begins and ends, we find this. I mean, if I could get my person that does my PowerPoints to have really done it correctly, there would have just been a big head. There would have not been any body. But she kept on trying to erase the body and erase the body and erase the body. And I said, no, you don't understand. You got to erase it even more than that. And so what we know is that there are iatrogenic stressors, that there are immunological stressors, that there are genetic stressors, that there are transplacental stressors, and then there are environmental stressors. And that each and every one of these, one child may have more of that mix than another child. But on some level, all of these things played into what we finally experienced. And what we're experiencing is an immunological disconnect. We're experiencing a digestive disconnect. We're experiencing a detoxification disconnect, an emotional disconnect, and a neurological disconnect. Now, I want to take each one of these and kind of walk through it, but this is really the primer, because what I was told was this was going to be for moms and dads of children who have autism. And so I wanted to kind of do this overview, because many of them, we assume that because they're in this, they have all the rest of the knowledge that the rest of us have. And there's a lot of very new people to this who don't have this information yet. But the immunological disconnect is they just don't get sick. I have patients who call me and say, I can't believe it. My son or my daughter is sick. This is the first time they've ever been sick. Or the other thing is, they're never well. They're never really sick. They can't get a fever, but they're never really well. And then there's this yeast mold overgrowth problem. And then multiple allergies, multiple reactions, multiple infections, Lyme, bacteria, viral, whatever it happens to be. And then on the digestive disconnect, there's food cravings, sugar and starch. And again, thinking back to that picture to where they're not connected, the reason that they're craving sugar and starch is you don't need a stomach to digest sugar. You don't need a stomach to digest starch. You do it in your mouth. And so they don't have any digestive ability below there, and it's a failure to thrive. I had a patient in New York who recently emailed me and said, my son gained 8 pounds. And I mean, it was like, you know, I just moved the mountain for this person. And they have selective appetites because they're turning what they do eat into garbage. And when you turn it into garbage, your body overproduces acids, and the body then produces mucus to protect itself from the acid it just produced from the rotting food. And then you have this big mucal load in the gastrointestinal tract, which is a great place for another conversation called biofilm. But they're constipated typically, and they also have low body fat. And the reason for that is because they can't absorb. They can't break down anything. They can't run all these pathways. Cholesterol goes to pregnenolone. Pregnenolone goes to progesterone. Progesterone goes to cortisol. Over here on the other side of it, pregnenolone goes to DHEA, goes to testosterone, goes to all the female hormones. So you see this person over here that when you do a test of their cortisol levels, they have none. And if you can see what's happening many times is their cholesterol is building way over here because it can't convert to the downstream chemistry it needs to convert to it. The detoxification overload, the headaches, the allergy, the food reactions, smell reactions, skin sensitivity, and a number of people say, I can't keep clothing on my kid. Every place we go, they take their clothes off. Well, why are they taking their clothes off? Because they're allergically reacting to their clothes because their body's detoxing and their clothes are picking up. They don't want them on. They don't like the pressure of it because they're hypersensitive. Their skin is hypersensitive. The neurological disconnect. You know, stemming is language that talks to a lot of the patients. I like loops or looping. They're in a motor loop. They keep on doing the same thing over and over again. They're in a verbal loop. They keep on saying the same thing over again. They're in a sound loop. The reason for that is they have no feedback. They say that, and they have no feedback from the rest of their body for what they are doing. They have abnormal deep tendon reflexes. Their autonomic nervous system is dysfunctional, and lack of neurological control mechanisms. They do outrageous things. They tippy-toe across the edge of this thing here, balancing on a toe. And you go, they're going to kill themselves. But they're after, they don't have any neurological, they don't know any limits. They don't know, they may be physically able to do all this stuff, jump or climb on things, but they don't have the neurological feedback to actually understand danger. They have elevated heart rates, and they have elevated respiration. The emotional overload are hyper-intense physical responses such as need for pressure, pinching and biting, emotional loops, laughing and giggling. And that is that because of the intensity of being here and an inability to express emotion, of course you're going to bite the nipple. Of course you're going to bite and you're going to pinch and you're going to do these other pent-up emotions because you can't do anything else because all your energy is right here. So what we can prove is that there's no functional immune response. We can also prove there's no energy to the extremities and that there's no core energy. And so what we can talk about these things is this core energy, either a posterior core or an anterior core. Dr. Moreno and I have talked about this, and we agree that it might be some neurological energy, it might be some acupuncture energy, some meridian energy, it may be chakra energy, but there's another big question mark down here as to exactly what is some of this energy that we're tracking when he holds his hands on the patient's head and I do my autokinesiology body check and so forth. We're finding the same things. Our tools for getting to the problem are different, but we're finding the same things, and that is there's no energy in this body. Let's say no energy continuity. There might be all sorts of energy for hyperactivity and so forth, but there is no energy for integration. There is no energy for function, etc.